This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the Glazov Gang is a fan-generated show. We are here only because of you, and we are so grateful for your generosity and all of your support in the last year that allowed the Glazov Gang to keep going and to keep getting the truth out there about the left, about Islamic supremacism, and how those two ideologies and forces work together in their war against Western civilization, against America, against freedom and liberty. You gave quite a speech very recently in your parliament, how to confront the Islamic State.
Yeah.
And you were saying, okay, this is great that we're involved in an air campaign against the Islamic State, etc. over there. But what are we doing about the Netherlands? What are we doing about protecting our security? Can you talk a bit about
Yes,
that?
of course, I support every military action against the Islamic State, both in Iraq and Syria. As a matter of fact, the Dutch F-16s are bombing along with the American airplanes. But I believe more important even than that, and that's why I'm an elected Dutch parliamentarian, is to make sure that our own country is safe. And not only Iraq and Syria, but our own country is safe. And all the politicians are, I have to say, ignoring that problem. They are fooling the constituents by saying, my own Prime Minister, Mr. Rutte, is doing that, but even your own President, Mr. Obama, your Secretary of State, I heard him 2 days ago when I arrived in the United States. People say, well, the Islamic State has nothing to do with Islam. They are misusing Islam. And I have to tell you, it's all lies. The problem we face today in our free Western society is that we have imported millions of people from Islamic countries with a background, with a culture, with an ideology of hate, a totalitarian ideology. And I believe that if we don't want to see in our own countries happening what we are seeing today in Iraq and Syria, we should fight against the Islamization of our own free society, which means that we should stop the Islamization of our societies, that we should stop the immigration from Islamic countries, that we should expel all the people who have even the slightest sympathy for the Islamic State, that we should encourage the voluntary repatriation of people from Islamic countries. We should de-Islamize our societies in order to stay free. And that is the point that I made in our parliament, that we should not only fight the Islamic State, but we should fight the Islamic monster in our own free societies.
Let us finish with this, Geert Wilders. Why do you do what you do?
I do what I do for one reason, and that is to defend freedom. That is why I called my party the Party for Freedom. Freedom is the most precious of everything, and we might disagree politically between the left and the right, but if there is a force that at the end of the day wants to kill our rule of law, our civil society, our freedom, the freedom of our children, people have to stand up, whatever the consequences, and say enough is enough.
Where do you get your bravery from?
Well, it's not so much bravery, it's being realistic. And if anything you say is met with threats and violence, you know that what you are doing is something worth doing. It sounds very crazy perhaps, but if I would have criticized Christianity instead of Islam, all those things would not have happened. Mm-hmm. Which means that the real nature, the real core business of Islam is that it's very intolerant, it's very dominant, it's very totalitarian, and it's very un-Western. And if I look to my country, the Netherlands, to the people who live there, they are not racist, they are not xenophobes, but they see so many changes for the worst. When their daughters go to have a drink or to dance in the streets, they are afraid what will happen to them. Mm-hmm. The homosexuals on the street that are beaten up in Amsterdam. I mean, train drivers that are being called whores just because they are women by so many Islamic people in my country. In every aspect of our society, we see changes for the worst. And I'm not even talking about everything that is happening with the Islamic State and terrorism today. And, well, those people elected me, and I believe that it's not too late. It's perhaps 5 minutes, not before, but after 12. But still, if we combine forces, and that's why it's so important that we should combine forces from America, from Australia, from Europe, and fight against it in the strongest possible way.
Bosch Boston is the first anti-jihad cartoonist, and yet he's also a former Muslim. Yeah. Let's get into, if you don't mind, a little bit more detail about your upbringing as a Muslim.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in the Bronx to Albanian Muslim parents, and while we were quote-unquote moderate, as they say, the misogyny, the Jew hatred, there was nothing moderate about it at all.
In your family?
In my family. Most of the women in my family were beaten, from my mother to my sister, you know, from my father to beating her up to her husband beating her up. And it was the norm, it was the accepted, it was the given.
I'm sorry for interrupting here, Bosch, and I want to also be tender with your privacy on these painful issues because this is your family, but your mom and your sister were beaten in front of you as a child?
Absolutely, and we were beaten as well.
But this was considered normal?
It was absolute norm. Whenever the man got pissed off, he had every right to just unleash on his wife.
But there was also a connotation that this is connected to Islam.
Absolutely.
Because one could say, oh, it was you grew up
European
in an abusive...
something, yeah.
How did you know that it was also...
Because it wasn't just my father, it was my uncles and my cousins and beating up their wives. And there was one cousin of mine who kicked his wife down the steps in front of everybody. The whole family was there. And no one did anything, no one said anything.
How old were you?
I must have been probably we went from the Bronx to Jersey, 10 years old.
Okay, and you received the understanding that this is normal and that women should be beaten and that it's Islamically sanctioned.
No doubt about it.
And did you begin at some point to believe this is right, or I'm interested in the conscience.
You know what?
Tell me about your conscience as a young boy.
We were born and raised in America, and going to school and having even Jewish friends, we understood this is horrific. And I gotta say, jealous of my friends who lived relatively normal lives. It was unheard of for my friend's mother to be beaten by his father. It was unheard of for him to be beaten, whereas us, it was always the case. But also in terms of the Jew hatred as well. You know, just one thing also about the misogyny. I walked in one day and my mom was crying heavily, and I said, what happened? What happened? I was really concerned. And I realized that she was mourning the birth of my first niece because it's a girl. And girls are worthless, according to Islam. And she would never have a normal life. And my mom had in her head that it's the inevitability of it all. She will never, ever be normal. She'll have to be sent off to a Muslim to be married, a Muslim who she never meets.
Bosch, before we go, what is Islam?
Islam is submission. Islam is death and destruction. Islam is here to control. Islam is here to make life on earth hell.
What is the Quranic argument against ISIS?
There is none.
Some Muslims just say they hate ISIS, but they don't have a Quranic foundation.
There's no Quranic argument. I mean, the only thing they can say is, well, you have your religion, we have ours, and we live and let live. But that was before. You know, that was after the fact of the abrogated verses, of the violent verses in the Quran. Ben Shapiro, continuing to be a hero almost every day and every night in our culture war. Ben, last night you crashed the UCLA divestment from Israel hearing. Wow, you scored a knockout, I think. Tell our viewers about it.
It was a lot of fun, you know. It didn't start off as a lot of fun. I started getting text messages from folks on campus. Actually, my wife did, because she's a UCLA alum as well, and she's a UCLA medical student. So she started getting text messages from some of her friends over at UCLA saying, there's this divestment hearing going on, you know, pray for the state of Israel. And so I started texting back saying, okay, what's going on? Is it an open hearing? How long is this thing going to be open? About 10 o'clock at night, my baby is about ready for bed. My wife's about ready for bed. I'm about ready for bed. I have to be up at 5 o'clock the next morning. And I'm thinking, do I need to go over there? And nobody's answering my text messages. So I figured, you know what? Screw this. And I got in the car, and it flashed through my head, WWABD, what would Andrew Breitbart do? And so I hopped in the Honda, the illustrious Honda Civic, and rode over to UCLA and went inside, and they were kind enough.
This is like an on-the-edge-of-your-seat thriller.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
so go ahead.
Right, except without the action or the excitement. And
Or the guns, because those are illegal in California.
Right, exactly. And so I get there, I go inside, and it's a packed house. It's a bunch of, almost all, I would say, Palestinian activists and allies, probably 75 to 80% people who are pro-divestment from Israel. And I went up to a rabbi that I knew over there, Rabbi Gorevich, who runs the Chabad house over there. And I said to him, is there any way that I can cut in line? Because I really need to get home. And so there's a whole line, probably 100 people who are waiting to speak, because there's an open forum, everybody gets 2 minutes. And so he went to the front of the line, and there was a nice gal from Bruins for Israel who's willing to step out and let me take her place. So suddenly I was second in line. And I'm listening to these people spout about Israel and lie about Israel. A girl gets up and literally says that when she was living in the Palestinian territory, she felt like the Jews could take her out on a bus and they could pull her off the bus and shoot her in the face at any time. People accusing the Jewish state of forced clitorectomies against women. I mean, things that only happen actually in Muslim countries, but Israel was being accused of. And the Israel students, unfortunately, a lot of them they have obviously the right motives at heart, but so many of them, the way that they deal with this is by falling into kind of a quasi-defense of Israel. Israel doesn't do these things. Israel is a great state. Why would you say that Israel would do these things? And that's precisely the wrong tactic with people who are aggressively anti-Semitic, which is what these folks were. So when I had my opportunity, I stood up and I really read the Student Council, the Riot Act, and I read the crowd, the Riot Act, for daring to put such a Jew-hating measure before the Student Council, because there is only one country on earth that they would think of doing this to, and it's the Jewish state. And the Jewish state, among all other states on planet Earth, with the exception of the United States, is the most moral state on planet Earth. So for anyone to attempt to take Israel and make it the exception that people should divest from businesses that invest in Israel is not only morally myopic, it's morally flipped. It's actually morally evil to do that.
And I would say, I heard the audio, it's up on Truth Revolt, and it was really brilliant. And like Ben was saying, instead of defending Israel, I think that we need to, as supporters of Israel, start calling it for what it is, and it's hatred. And when you can do that with liberals, is flip it back on them. No, I'm not the bigot, I'm not the homophobe, I'm not the anti-Semite here like you are. And kind of put that back in their court, it kind of throws them off kilter.
And I would highly recommend that when it comes to discussing anti-Semitism, the term anti-Semitism is dated and it's been perverted, and the term to be used is Jew hatred, because this is what it is. It is hatred of Jews.
You've written an amazing article in February 2013. It's called Notes Toward Winning the Culture War by Mark Tapson. Google it, look it up on frontpagemac.com. Who owns the culture is who owns political power.
Oh, yes.
And this is what Marxists understood very well. Gramsci, all of them, they understood that in order to capture power, you need to control the culture. This is something that conservatives do not understand, something that you're an expert on writing about. In that article, you write about how conservatives lose because the left laid the groundwork for political victory in the cultural arena. Talk a bit about that and how conservatives are blind to it.
Well, we lost the last two elections because, as you just mentioned, we lost in the political arena because for decades, the left had been laying the groundwork in the cultural arena. And until conservatives get their heads around that, I mean, the political arena is obviously a critical battleground, and it's good that we have people fighting in that arena. But until conservatives get their heads around the fact that the culture is everything, and as Andrew Breitbart was fond of saying, politics flows downstream from culture, then we're not going to win another presidential election. It's all about the culture now. Yeah. And conservatives, typically are very uncomfortable with the culture. It's an arena that we ceded to the left long ago, largely unwittingly. And so it's reached the point now where conservatives are so repulsed by what the culture has become that their instinct is to reject it. I'm not going to give those people in Hollywood a dime of my money. I canceled my cable TV. I'm not going to watch any of that filth. I don't buy, CDs, music CDs. The problem with that attitude, which I understand, but the problem with it is that disengagement is not how you win a culture war. And you take yourself out of the culture stream and end up sitting on the banks while the rest of the country flows by you, and you become as marginalized as the Amish. And then you lose in the political arena as well. So it's really important for conservatives to understand how important the culture is, to be willing to dive into the fray and be willing to embrace pop culture, and pop culture specifically, because pop culture is American culture. And American culture is world culture.
Yeah.
So this is another thing conservatives don't really, they're only just beginning to grasp, I think, is the messages that we send out from our culture, from Hollywood specifically. The messages that we send out are shown all around the world. So the world now looks to Hollywood pretty much as the barometer of American character and our political direction and moral direction. So that's a critical battleground.
Oh, no.
What is one of the most serious issues of our time right now?
There, to me, there is only one issue. Actually, there's two issues. Issue number one is radical Islam. That is just no joke about that. They're out to change the
And
world.
Obama's on this to protect us, right?
And that is issue number two. We need a president who is living in reality. Like, if you watch the State of the Union address, like I did last night, it didn't seem to be based in reality. He opens it up with, the shadow is past. What? The shadow has passed?
He doesn't even mention Islam.
It never says Al-Qaeda, never mentions Islam. And hey, that's gotta be priority one. The economy, I'm a firm believer in Americans and small businesses and all that. The American economy is idiot-proof. If you just don't do anything, really smart people around the country will get their businesses going and they'll hire people. Just don't worry. The only thing we should be worried about right now is radical Islam. That's it.
This is a very special Glazov Gang because tonight we begin with the question, what's been on your mind? And we begin with Aaron Shuster.
Oh, well, one of the things that's been bothering me was President Obama was interviewed on I think an internet news site called Vox or something, and he was talking about the attack in Paris, and he said that the people that were killed in the kosher deli in Paris were how did he put it? A random bunch of folks, so the next couple of days, the White House has been doing damage control and making it even worse because they will not say that these people were targeted for being Jews, even though the terrorists made a phone call from the kosher deli to some French news organization and said, I'm killing them because they're Jews. That's why he was there. So it bothers me that our president will not specifically explain what these Islamists are doing, and that anti-Semitism is a very driving factor in the whole Islamist movement. I mean, as we know, Jews are being driven out of Europe. It's down to, I just read an article, it's down to like 0.2% of the population in Europe. I mean, it's really a drop in the bucket. So that was really bothering me. Okay. And I was thinking, how would Obama talk about the Holocaust? A random bunch of folks were rounded up and shipped off to these camps. But not because they were Jewish, it was just random people.
Well, Aaron, that's a very profound perspective as a scholar of Middle East politics and also as a person who understands the mind of the left because you were inside that mind. Why does Obama need to cover up that the targets are Jewish people and that the perpetrators are Muslims?
Well, I don't even think it's a question of right and left. I think Obama's perspective, Obama, to me, I can't really get a handle on his mindset because...
Well, it's a leftist mindset.
No, but I think it's more than a leftist mindset.
Okay.
I think it's I think he's very, what's the word? He's very connected to the Islamic world. Okay. It could be because of his upbringing. I mean, he lived in Malaysia. He supposedly, studied in a...
So there's a sympathy also.
There's a sympathy there.
Yeah, for the.
I mean, we know he just had some sort of meeting at the White House where a lot of Muslim Brotherhood people were called in.
Thank you. Well, I would say that all this goes together because I think that the leftist mind is always reaching out in solidarity to adversary cultures and ideologies in terms of people who hate the United States because there's a shared belief that America is the great Satan. Anne-Marie, what do you think of Aaron's profound interpretation and thoughts on what Obama said about this attack on these random folks?
He's absolutely right, and I agree. I think that Obama he will always side with whoever is the opposite of us. He'll always side with whoever is the opposite of Israel. We're seeing this over and over, and the narrative right now, and I witnessed this firsthand on our Politics Facebook page. We put a meme up of the Jordanian pilot who was burning, and it wasn't even that graphic, but we were attacked from all kinds of trolls and people, and our viewership went up 4 million, up to our post reach was up to 4 million.
Wow, fantastic.
We were absolutely being attacked, but at first they were saying that we were being disrespectful for showing this picture. And so I put up another post, I explained why it's important to show this. Very soon after that, the narrative changed from being disrespectful to being that we were enabling the terrorists. And real soon, right around the same time, Media Matters started putting out these headlines about stop talking about them and they'll go away. A UCLA professor pretty much said the same thing. Now they're trying to get us to stop talking about Islam completely. So there is definitely a narrative they're trying to just make us stop talking about it completely.
Yeah, I guess that back during Hitler's days, if we had just stopped talking about the Nazis, or during the Khmer Rouge, if we stopped talking about the Khmer Rouge, they would have just went away. Ari, David, very profound insights by the two Glazov Gang members. Your thoughts?
I actually disagree with Aaron in this respect. I'm someone who has a problem essentially with everything Obama does. If Obama breathes, I have a problem with it. So that's the kind of person I am politically, in my opinions.
Well, let me interrupt for a second. We do not want Obama's death, though. We want him to keep breathing.
No, but I disagree with the way he inhales, exhales, nose or mouth.
The Glazov Gang does not support any kind of violence or
through
death.
a cocaine straw. Any way he breathes, I have a problem with it.
Yeah, don't follow his tweets. Ari's, don't.
Okay, let's go ahead. So you disagree?
Can I talk?
Yes.
Okay, so
okay,
anyway,
so Aaron,
the point is, Obama's a man who parses everything, and I call this Pretzeling. People on the left, there's no way they can discuss any issue honestly using plain English language without getting in trouble with some political correct demarcation point that they've self-constructed for themselves. So Obama and everyone else on the left does what I call Pretzeling, which is this ultra careful parsing in which even when they try to be honest, they wind up being completely dishonest. So in the case of the random comment, in my personal interpretation, Obama was speaking about the fact that victims walked into the store randomly and didn't know they were going to be the specific targets that particular day. Being that as it may, we all know about his affinity towards Islam and his, loathness to, criticize it under any terms. But I think we can actually cut him a little bit of slack in that one case.
And this is what makes the Glazov Gang special, because we are probably one of the only shows, if not the only show, that really tells the truth about the left and Islamic supremacism, about the texts, about Islamic theology that inspire and sanction Islamic jihad and Islamic supremacism, and about how the left is allied to our enemies. So we're coming to you today because the capabilities and the capacity of the Glazov Gang to continue, the lifespan, in other words, of the Glazov Gang is quite limited. And the end of the Glazov Gang is on the horizon. So we're coming to you, our fans, to ask you to do what you've done over the last year, is to continue supporting us and to do your best to help save the Glazov Gang. So please go to jamieglazov.com and support us in any way you can, and also subscribe to the Glazov Gang's YouTube channel. We are very grateful to you, and we hope that the Glazov Gang can remain alive and continue to bring you the truth about the culture war and the terror war that we are in. We love all of our fans very much. Thank you for being there for us, and we'll see you again on the Glazov Gang. Good night.